In life, we all encounter obstacles, and those obstacles come in all different shapes, sizes, and forms. The question is, how do we handle those obstacles? Do we attack them head on, or do we allow them to make us quit? Welcome to the No Quit Living podcast, where we aim to motivate and inspire listeners to never give up on themselves, their dreams, or their goals. We will interview successful people from all walks of life as they share their no-quit stories when they had the choice to give up or give in, but they didn't. We thank you for listening, and we hope to be that jolt of positivity as you go for your greatness. Welcome to episode number 175 of the No Quit Living podcast. I'm your host, Christopher J. Worth, and today's theme of the day is Go For It. Our quote of the day comes to us from Wayne Dyer. Go for it now. The future is promised to no one. Today's episode is sponsored by the good people over at West Fair Communications, who publish the Westchester County Business Journal and the Fairfield County Business Journal. These newspapers do a wonderful job in covering all aspects of the business world within two of the most influential markets in the New York metropolitan area. You can also take advantage of their daily news feeds, which keep track on the companies and thought leaders in these important regions. For more information, take a look at www.westfaironline.com. Trust me, once you start reading, you won't quit. I'm excited to bring you today's episode, as I had a lot of fun during our recording. It was such a blast connecting with Zeke Zelker, and I want to thank my podcast partner, Wes Yee, for the introduction. Zeke and I had a lot of fun going back and forth on today's conversation, and it's hard not to be excited by his upbeat and positive attitude. I hope you enjoy today's episode. Zeke, I'd like to welcome you to the No Quit Living podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
So the first question we ask everybody is, are you ready to bring it today?
Every day, every minute of the day.
I love it. I knew that would be your answer. So as we were talking before we went live, the number one objective of our show is to motivate and inspire our listeners to never give up. And I was curious if you have either a no-quit story yourself or perhaps a really challenging time that tested you and you could have given up or given in, but you didn't.
Oh, sure. Being a creative, there's a lot of times that you want to quit, mostly from the financial stress that being a creative ends up having. I kind of subscribe to the idea of all in. Every single project that I take and everything, I literally put everything on the line. So I can't quit. If I quit, I fail, and failure is never an option for me. I constantly not only test myself in terms of creativity, but I also do it physically as well. You know, I'm in the middle of producing this very big project right now, and I decided that I want to run my first marathon and going into training for that, and then having feet problems and everything else, and I still ran the marathon although I could barely walk. It's just that sort of thing that I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs, that's like our kind of mindset. There's just no way of you just can't quit. It's not even in my vocabulary. And I'd rather be beat down and everything else by than ever quitting.
Oh, that's awesome. I appreciate you sharing that. So what did you run the marathon in?
You mean in time or
Yep.
Where?
Both.
Okay, so it was the Marine Corps Marathon in Washington, D.C., and I ran it in a very slow 4:53. I never ran a race before in my life, and I have a lot of respect for people that do, especially now. I just thought I'd go out and run it. I had no clue how to go in and get water. It was just a complete experience, but it was pretty wild, and it's very, very humbling to be running with a bunch of Marines and fellow citizens and stuff. It was just extraordinarily inspiring.
No, that's awesome. And as we spoke about, I went to college down in Maryland, and my cousin went to the Naval Academy, so spent a lot of time down in the Annapolis, Maryland area, D.C., Washington. So it was pretty neat that he did himself, I believe, the marathon 2 or 3 times down there. So that's pretty.
Yeah, it's awesome.
So I wanted to ask you, Zeke, if you wouldn't mind just telling our listeners a little bit about who you are and what you're doing today.
Sure. So I am a filmmaker / entrepreneur. I'm in the midst of producing a cross-platform project called Billboard, where it's a 25-episode web series and then also a feature film. I created a virtual radio station where bands submit music to us from all over the world. There's over 1,000 bands. And the story is about a radio station, WTOIT 960, who's trying to bring themselves out of the ratings basement. And to do so, they host a billboard sitting contest where 4 people live in a billboard to 1 survives to win a mobile home and $60,000. I've been working on this project for close to 10 years now. There's been a lot of times that things have gotten very, very tough and very, very challenging, mostly because people didn't quite understand what I was doing or how I was trying to do it. Because I firmly believe that entertainment's going towards a new paradigm where you can't just create a linear storyline. You kind of have to build story worlds where the audience can jump in and jump out of the story. And that's why we created the web series, which tells one side of the story. The feature film tells the other side of the story. And then what's the link between the two is a virtual radio station that I created where we have a very large fan base and everything else around, and extraordinarily humbled by all that. But I've been, making films for close to 20 years. I moved back to my hometown of Allentown, Pennsylvania to make a difference because I got very, very tired of everybody bashing my hometown thanks to the Billy Joel song. And I wanted to move home to make a difference. My family started at an amusement park there called Dorney Park that I pretty much grew up in. And so I kind of have a very different outlook on life because of all the lessons learned from the park.
I was about to say that's probably quite an interesting childhood growing up with that.
Oh yeah, we used to climb up the roller coasters and slide down them on our rear ends and things, and it was just like no fear. And that's the thing. It's a matter of growing up in an environment like that. You learn very interesting business principles. For instance, and this is something that I lecture at different universities and things as well. Is a matter of you have an entertainment vehicle, and then around that you have different profit centers. And that's how you basically make money in the entertainment business. And it's just a matter of kind of that risk reward sort of idea too that you learn very early on. And also the idea of building out story worlds, because you go to Kittyland's a different experience versus going over to the haunted house area and all these sorts of things. It's kind of it kind of became built into my DNA of how I create now.
That's interesting. And I definitely would say that probably your upbringing has had a lot of impact in different ways in your film career just because of growing up in that whole no fear mentality. And I wish we were friends back in middle school.
I had a lot of friends because of getting free passes to the park. It's funny you talk about no quitting, Chris. Is my great grandmother lived underneath a roller coaster for 64 years. Because my great-grandfather wanted to get a divorce and she would not grant him one. So he built her a house underneath the roller coaster, and she ended up outliving him and everything else. And she literally died living underneath a roller coaster in a house, mind you. But so it's kind of I think this whole idea of not quitting and not succumbing to things is completely in my DNA.
No, I definitely agree. And I think your grandma sounds like quite a interesting woman.
Oh, she was. She absolutely was. Yeah.
So changing lanes here for a second, I wanted to ask you, what does success mean to you, or how do you personally define success?
Success to me means that I keep doing what I love to do. It's not a monetary thing to me. My biggest thing is I want to affect people. And that is where I find success, is that if I'm able to introduce something or change somebody or inspire one person, I find that to be successful. And that's kind of where I've always built my entire business off of, and that I really want to be able to enable and empower other people to live out the things that they want to do as well.
I love that, enable and empower people. And I think it's something that more often than not, we kind of lose sight of, and the importance of being successful. And as you said, it's not a monetary thing, but it's something in regards to individualized in what you want to do. But I love that, enabling and empowering people, because I think that's something that we spoke about in regards to somebody that we know, the gentleman that is my partner on my podcast, Wes. You had mentioned that for a while you'd been mentoring him. So I wanted to ask you in that regard, is there anybody that's mentored you along the way?
I wish I had more mentors. Honestly, I kind of moved back to my hometown where there's no other filmmakers. And so I learned a lot of things on my own. And that's one reason why I think I've kind of looked at this as a long tail instead of a short tail. My grandfather was probably the most important person in my life. He and my mother. My mother is a tenacious, inspiring woman. She's a minister. She was one of the first women ordained in the state of Pennsylvania. And she is still preaching. She's 75 years old. She keeps going. But yeah, I wish I had more mentors. I like mentoring other people, mind you, quite a bit, because I feel like I studied a little bit in Israel, and I always found it very fascinating where the Rosh Yeshiva would say, let's go learn together. And so it's a matter of taking the highest person, the most educated person, and then talking to somebody like well below them and being like, I can learn as much from you as you can from me. And that's where like I think that you really kind of have to look at things as a matter of like learning is a two-way street. The person that's teaching is learning as much as the student is. And that's something that I hold very value, but I really wish I had more mentors growing up.
No, I think that's incredible that your mom is still 75 and still preaching. I think that obviously longevity runs in your family.
Oh yeah. It's also the matter of doing, like nobody's going to do things for you. You know, in our day and age, it's very hard to rely on other people because a lot of people are full of false hope and broken promises sort of thing. And so that's one reason why like I set out and create my own path. It's like I want to make sure that I'm in control of my own destiny, and I will work very, very hard in doing so. And it's just a matter of there is no other way to do it than on your own laurels.
No, I totally agree with that. I think at the end of the day, it comes down to you. Now, some people will help along the way, but as you said, nobody's going to really do it for you. They might help, they might inspire, but at the end of the day, at the beginning of every day, you got to put in an action yourself.
Oh, absolutely. It's like in my business, it takes a lot of capital to be able to do what we do. So I refinance houses, I refinance things to be able to get the capital because, quite honestly, people that have said that they were going to help me, like whether it be equity investment or anything like that, they've always there's always been something that's happened that's never guaranteed it. So I decided that I was going to only create off of my own cash flow, and so that's kind of like an anomaly too. Is that all my projects I end up owning. Because I have very little outside equity in what I do, so it's kind of I also am creating a different business model than the norm as well.
Yeah, I was just about to say that is a very different business model because most people in that space, they raise money with different investors, and the fact that you create off of your own capital, that probably almost puts you in a category of one.
Or pretty gosh darn close to it. Like a friend of mine was just talking to me about M. Night Shyamalan, and like where he actually has done the same sort of thing, but nobody really knows it. He had some failures, unfortunately, but he put all of his assets on the line for a project, and he's been building back off that project ever since. And I have so much more admiration for him now because of that we're basically built from the same cloth. We're literally, I think, like 50 miles from each other in the state of Pennsylvania. So it's kind of cool.
You guys should collaborate on something.
Yeah, no kidding. Like he's a whole different mindset than I do. He's in that supernatural kind of thing that I can't get my head wrapped around because all the facades at Dorney Park kind of like blew that out of my my thought process because of knowing that everything was fake.
So I wanted to ask you, Zeke, if you had to define yourself in only one word, what would that word be?
Tenacious. That was quick.
Hey,
but I'm tenacious. Yeah.
No, that's a good word. Wanted to ask you. You shared a little bit about your background and obviously your grandfather and your mother and your grandmother. What's the best advice you remember receiving?
The best advice I ever remember receiving. My grandfather, before he passed away, gave me a carousel ring from the original carousel. And he had basically said, don't ever stop reaching for the brass ring. Don't ever give up hope. And that's the thing that's always stayed with me is like, don't ever give up hope. But at the same time, you have to work for, everything that you have. Don't, rest on somebody else's word. But that's probably the best advice I've ever got is never to give up hope.
No, I think that's important advice no matter what it is, whether you're an entrepreneur or not. I think hope is something that in today's day and age, I don't think we have enough of out there.
Yeah. Chris, do you have any mentors?
Yeah, I have it's a good question. I do have a couple mentors. A very good friend of mine, a gentleman by the name of Bob Berg, is a best-selling author, and he ironically launched his own podcast about 8 months before I launched mine, and we have a connection where we spend about 1 to 2 meetings every single year down in Florida, and he's been unbelievable to me, not only with his time, but with his advice, his guidance. And I think for me, my father taught me growing up, you always learn from others, and you never want to recreate the wheel yourself. But I feel, and just as you said about mentoring others, is if I can learn something or teach something to somebody else so they don't have to have that same failure or missed experience, I believe in the concept of karma, where you want to pay it forward to others. So I'm extremely fortunate. I've had a couple other people throughout the launch of our podcast that have been just absolutely amazing with not only their time, their advice, but they've been doing this before and longer. And for me, I was very humble, and I basically asked a ton of people if they could go back and redo their podcast or relaunch it, what would they do differently and what would they do the same? And some of the advice has just been amazing.
And why did you gravitate towards doing podcasts?
Good question. It's something that I became very excited about because I myself at the time was listening to about 5 or 6 different podcasts. At the time, I was coaching high school basketball as well, and a couple of friends of mine had recommended a couple coaching or basketball web podcasts that I really enjoyed. And then from there, I just started searching. And what I love about podcast is, in the media world, is if you turn on a radio station or you turn on the TV, for the most part, you can somewhat choose what you want to watch. Now, obviously, with Netflix and other things like that, but in regards to podcasting, you can actually listen to people, both guests and non-guests, and see what the topic is or see what the episode's about. And for me, it doesn't matter what you're looking for. There's a podcast out there, whether it's business, sports, personal development, family. I mean, there's just so many amazing things out there. What I love about it is it's a free media outlet for people. All you need to have is a phone or a tablet or an internet connection, and you can get podcast episodes for free. So I think it's really cool, and it's something where you talked about mentoring others and giving back. As I always tell people, if you're looking to improve or change, think about just listening to some podcasts, because you could get some amazing free advice.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And it's amazing what technology has done, both like for humanity and against humanity. And it's fascinating. It really is. And which, depending on how you think is which part of the divide you're on. I feel like technology has actually put people a lot more isolated than they have together in a lot of degrees. So that's interesting. That's really cool. How'd you go out and find your mentors?
Great. That's a great question. For me, there's a lot of science behind it. So hopefully you have a pen and a paper. So for me, it's all about, just like the whole premise behind our show is no quitting. I got in contact with people. I found their email address or their Instagram or Twitter handle and shot them a message. A lot of times I reached out to them via a handwritten note or a phone call. And for me, it's all about the no quit. And Bob Berg, who I mentioned is a good friend and a mentor of mine, I just wrote him a handwritten note. He responded to me, and I called him, and he said, next time you're down in the area, and I happen to be going down there about 2 months after that. We met for about an hour, and I talk about that all the time. And I guess a good premise is everybody knows 6 degrees of separation, or what is it, the Kevin Bacon rule. And in today's day and age, I feel you're 1 degree separated from that person. All you have to do is be willing to put in the work and the effort. So for me, when there's people I want to find or I want to connect with, it's very simple. You just go out and make it happen.
Well, yeah, it's interesting is because like the whole idea of not quitting, like I've been told no numerous times, and I just keep going back. And it's about like I change my pitch a little bit, or I change my approach a little bit, and like literally, generally by the 3rd or 4th time, they're more receptive for some weird reason. And it's fascinating. It's almost like the whole baseball thing: 3 strikes you're out. In Judaism, if you're going to I just lost the word. If you're going to try and basically be a Jew, you have to go before you have to ask a rabbi like 3 times, but they have to tell you no at least twice. Before they'll possibly learn with you and things, which is very fascinating. If you're going to convert to Judaism, so there's interesting things that it's a matter of like I think if somebody is having a challenge of trying to break through something, it's a matter of maybe you need to keep going forward, but also changing your approach a little bit and go back at them. It's all a matter of like that comfort thing. It's a matter of like just not taking no for an answer. If you truly believe in what you're doing and you think that it's a benefit.
No, I love that, and I think that's so important. Is you do have to change your pitch a little bit, and it's perfectly okay to receive a no. What doesn't make sense, obviously, is to go back with the same pitch or the same concept or the same idea. You need to take that advice or the person that tells you no, and you need to internalize it and say, okay, let me change this, my offer, my pitch, or let me see if I can fix it or tweak it a little bit. And I think that's where sometimes people miss the boat, is they continue to go back with the same approach, and the same approach is not going to work. What is the famous quote is doing the same thing and expecting different results is insanity.
Yeah. Well, it's also true. It's like if people say that, like, okay, well, I don't have the time to meet with you. Be like, where do you grab coffee? I'll walk with you to grab coffee or something. Just like I just want to, have 5 minutes of your time, and then like I'll set up different meetings or I'll call it a scrum, which I never like. I'm like, okay, we'll go meet someplace for 10 minutes. We do not have to sit down. I just need to talk to you about 2 or 3 different things, and you could be out. Because I think one of our biggest valuable things is our time. And so I think a lot of times people say no to meeting with somebody or doing something for somebody is because they don't have the time to be able to do it. And so like put the shoe on the other foot and be like, well, okay, how can we make this happen? And that's not a desperate, mind you, but or stalkerish. But I think there's a lot of different ways and a lot of different approaches.
It's so interesting that you say that, because it kind of goes back to the question you asked me: is how did I go about getting some of my mentors? I use that same approach. If I were to call you and say, hey, Zeke, would you give me an hour or 2 hours of your time out of the blue? The reality is, like you said, one of our most valuable things is our time. You're probably going to say, or not probably, you're definitely going to say no. But if I called you or I got introduced to you by somebody else and said, hey, Zeke, wanted to know if I could literally pick your brain for 5 minutes, or just want to get your perspective on a couple things, you're most likely going to respond, because at some point in your life, you reach out to somebody else. And I think that's the one thing I tell people all the time is you need to be creative. Just like you said, time is so valuable. You can't ask a stranger or somebody you don't know that well for a couple hours or an afternoon of their time. But it's perfectly okay, I think, to say to that person, hey, I really believe that you could offer me some value. I really enjoy your fill in the blank. I was wondering if you'd give me 5 minutes of your time at a time that's convenient for you. And like you said before, it could be something as simple as going to grab coffee with someone or going for a walk. But the reality is, if you want something enough and you find value in, and you think it's going to be valuable for you as well as the other person, it's okay to ask somebody for help. It's a difference, I feel, of asking for help as opposed to a handout.
Oh, yeah, it's interesting too, is because you also have to think about what can they get out of you too, and that sort of thing, because everything's a give and take. And it's a matter of like advice. And quite honestly, like if you ask an older person for advice, what they're going to get out of you is probably your vitality, and keeps them like inspired for another day. So like it doesn't necessarily have to be something like, okay, what can I do for you? But at the same time, realizing where people are at and things to be able to provide some sort of benefit to them as well.
No, I definitely agree, and I think it is that two-way street. So speaking of advice, I wanted to ask you if there's anything that you're reading or something that you've read that you'd like to recommend to our listeners.
Oh my gosh! I just finished David Goggins.
I have it right. I have it right.
Can't hurt me. Yeah, and I was in the Marine Corps, so I've got a little bit of that mentality. And I got to tell you, it's an inspiration. And when he was in another book, I forget the author's name, of Living with a SEAL, Jesse Isaacson, I think, or
yep.
Jesse something.
Yep, he's his wife's the co-founder of Spanx. Yep.
Yeah, and so I read that, and that literally started me on my marathon journey. I'm like, if these guys can do this thing, I can do it. It's just going to take time, and devotion, and setting a goal and going forward, going towards that. And so, reading that book totally, I'm like, yeah, there's a little bit of psychosis there, but it's brilliant. It really is really, really good. And you know what, also too, which I did not know when I bought it. He self-published that book. Yes,
he did. And it's interesting you say that because he self-published it, he sold out on Amazon and some other places much quicker because he was self-publishing it. But I'm only 40 or 45 pages into it, so I will definitely I'll let you know what I think about it after. But it's funny that you said that, because it's literally right next to me on my desk.
Yeah, and also too is realizing where he came from. He did not come from anything easy. And things. And like, I think that it hardened him to be able to do and achieve the things that he's done, but he also learned from them and internalized them. And that ended up being, fuel for the fire. Because I think too, it's like a matter of like, that's something that I think a lot of people need to do, is like figuring out and thinking about what fuels them, what's going to keep them motivated, what's going to keep them burning, and like, and not quit. It's like not quitting is a matter of keeping a fire going. And you have to just figure out what is that fire. And, there's a lot of people doing senseless things. They're in a job that they can't stand. And so why keep doing it? And it just is kind of crazy. Like my wife, for instance, when I first met her, she was in pharmaceutical sales, absolutely miserable. She wanted to be a photographer. And I told her, like, we ended up getting together and got married. I'm like, just quit your job and be a photographer. She's like, but we don't have no steady income, because my income's not steady because I'm a freelance and I'm a filmmaker and stuff. I'm like, just do it. We'll figure it out. But she's been so happy for the past 8 years because of it. And have things been easy? Hell no. But at the same time, she's doing what she wants to do, and she's very passionate, and she inspires other people as well. So you just have to take the risk, just do it.
No, that's awesome. And for our listeners who don't know David Goggins' story, definitely Google him, check him out. He is a gentleman that did 3 Hell Weeks in 1 year of Navy SEALs. But I think the most interesting story is he did a 100-mile race basically without training. He had to qualify for it. So he's just a crazy guy. And I've actually tried to get him on the show. So if any listeners out there have a direct connection to David Goggins, please let me know, because I would love to have him on the show.
Yeah, he's definitely an inspiration. He's truly an inspiration.
So you mentioned something exciting coming out in your life, both February 1st as well as April 5th. I just wanted to ask if you wouldn't mind telling our listeners a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So on February 1st, we're starting to release a web series called The Billboard Sitters. We're going to be releasing it through different sorts of social media platforms. And then if people want to see all 29 episodes of the web series, they can go to billboardmovie.com and be able to download the entire series for $2.99. And then that part of the project is solely about 4 people living on a billboard and all the craziness that they have to endure living out in the open and being exposed as part of a radio stunt. Then we have a feature film that's going to be released nationally in theaters starting on April 5th that tells the story of the radio station that hosts the contest. And the film is really about an entrepreneur struggling to succeed, those sorts of things that entrepreneurs have to go through and do to try and keep the lights on that not many people think about. And the film really is a matter of behind the scenes of what it takes to put on a spectacle that it is a spectacle itself. And people will be able to see that starting on April 5th in a theater near you. And people can find out more information about it at billboardmovie.com. Or reach out to me. I'm at Zeke Zelker on all different platforms and stuff. And I do write a blog periodically as well at zekezelker.com.
No, that's awesome, and I appreciate that. We'll put that in the show notes as well. So wanted to ask
Thank you so much.
Wanted to ask you, if you could have dinner with anybody, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Wow. Right now it would be David Goggins. Honestly. I mean, just because that's a today thing. But it's just a matter of, because to know and to learn from him of where the fight starts and how do you not succumb to adversity like that. I have it in my own life and things, and I'm pretty much the same way. But I just would like to chat with him and just be I don't know what the heck I'd say, but that's one person that's top of mind right now. And also too is I'd love to spend another day with my grandfather. I really would. Just a brilliant mind, and so valued in his own family, not our own personal family, but his extended family.
No, that's awesome, and I think it's important to pay back to different people. So I wanted to ask you, before we let you go, if you have any parting words you'd like to leave with our listeners.
Yeah, the biggest thing is it's like I think we covered quite a bit of stuff, Chris. It's a matter of thinking about what fuels you, and not. Once you really figure that out and what your aspirations are, is a matter of just going for it and just not looking back. No matter of valuing people's time and valuing your own time for that matter. But it's just a matter of really, when you set your eyes on something and you really know that's what you should be doing, there is no quitting.
No, I love that, and I could not agree more. So listen, Zeke, I truly appreciate what you shared with us today, and I'd love to stay in contact, and I appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to episode number 175. In addition to being a great guest, Zeke's family also happens to be the founders of Dorney Park. Zeke mentioned how he subscribes to the all-in philosophy and how there is no quit in him. His definition of success was awesome. He said it was to keep doing what he loves to do and impact people by enabling and empowering others. To me, that says it all. Doing what you love to do while still helping others. Zeke's definition definitely goes hand in hand with our whole pay it forward theme. We discussed the idea of mentors, and I really see how and why it is important to help others along the way. One thing Zeke mentioned was the importance of bringing value to others while valuing both your time as well as theirs. In his parting words, Zeke said, just go for it and don't look back. So my question to our listeners today, what is it that you really and truly want in 2019? If you don't know, that's okay, but take some time and figure it out. It's important to have a goal, an objective, or something to strive for. Zeke Zelker has a famous quote that's spot on with this. He says, you can't hit a target that you don't have. I challenge you to find your target. And when you have it, just go for it. Go for your greatness and don't look back. And lastly, to our listeners, thank you. We truly appreciate your time, and we hope our episodes inspire you to keep on attacking life and never giving up. To quote Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, it's always too early to quit.